Good morning everyone, welcome to week 2 on the conversion. So I've just come in this morning to the van and it looks like we're fighting a losing battle against our condensation. So hopefully you can see up here there's quite a lot of kind of water up there, so the roof is the kind of worst part. So got us some towels and things to try and dry it out a bit whilst we wait for the paint to arrive so we can paint the rust spots on the floor, and then we'll be able to get some insulation in, and that should definitely help. Whilst the rain is really quite heavy and we're waiting for the paint still to be able to actually treat these properly, these ones here, these bigger holes, they're raised up from the floor, so we're going to hammer those down so they're flush fitting. And then the current thinking is we'll cut something off the bulkhead, a little square patch, because that hole's probably a bit too big to just seal with Sikaflex. So we'll just cut a square patch off there and Sikaflex that down to the floor to stop any kind of water coming up through there or anything like that. So that's much flatter now, so that will be a much nicer kind of base of support to put our metal plate on. To treat this rust, we're going to need a wire brush, a rust converter, and some anti-rust paint.
After we wire brushed the entire floor, we swept away all the excess and then went over the patches with a good layer of our rust converter.
This is what the Hammerite Crust, which is the anti-rust paint, looks like after it's applied. So I started at the cab end and worked my way this way. Some of the patches have gone a lot darker than others, so it kind of goes of blue or black over the rust bits, which can then be painted over after. It says 3 hours. But once it is dry, I'll start with our direct to rust smooth white. We've been deliberating these passenger seats, the front bench seats we've got here for a while. We've always going to take out the middle one so we can get through from the front to the back whenever we want without having to go outside the van, either for emergencies or just because it's raining. But we were wondering about either replacing it with a single seat, but transpires that would need us to replace these 2 boxes with a single box. Well, second-hand seats are pretty expensive. We'd be looking at probably about £200 at least for a spare seat. So what we're going to do is cut the middle seats. There's one solid structural member here, but if we cut down the side of that, so this should give you a better view. So between the seats you've got this solid metal structure, so we're going to cut. Might leave the space because that's one solid piece, so that might be a bit more complicated. But if we take out this, we can get behind here. We should be able to take it all out. We will have to take the seat belt out because I've read that it's an MOT failure if you have a seat belt but no seat, because then they test it for a seat. So we'll look at taking the seats out and cutting them in half, and we'll see how we go with that. So I've just taken the bolts out of the seats. There was one here, same on the other side, and then one goes through here and through here. But what I will point out is, see, there's this just held on by Velcro. There's this yellow connector here, and this is to do with the airbag and the seatbelt sensor. And so once you've disconnected that, if you turn the ignition on or the engine on or anything at all, you'll apparently get a warning light on the dashboard. So we're going to make sure that we finish all of this before we turn the ignition on or anything like that. There we go. So that's now disconnected, and then once we fit the seat back on, we will have to reconnect that. With the cup holders folded down, we can undo the bolts and remove this piece.
Once all the bolts are out and we've cut the fabric, we've then just peeled it back to expose the metal frame ready for cutting.
This yellow clip that we unplugged in the van runs all the way up to the seatbelt tensioner, and the seatbelt is, you can't pull the seatbelt out right now. So what the plan is because we don't want to leave a seatbelt without a seat, is to remove this plastic trim, which I've located a handy hidden bolt for, and then move the seatbelt buckle down to here, probably tape it up on the inside of this just to stop it rattling around, and that should avoid any engine warning lights or anything when we plug it back in, because the seatbelt will still exist. At this point, the jigsaw blade fell out and the jigsaw was trying to jump around quite a lot. We think this is probably because the surface we were running the jigsaw along isn't particularly flat. So I managed to get that far with the jigsaw, but I really think an angle grinder would be better for this, because it was starting to try and jump quite a lot, which was not fun. So I've gone for the good old-fashioned hand saw, and I'm trying that down there. I've made a bit of progress so far. The jigsaw yesterday wasn't working very well, so I've bought this reciprocating saw instead, which should do the job quite well. So I've just put the metal blade on it. So we'll use that instead, and hopefully we'll get through the rest of the seat very easily.
We opted to glue the fabric back together as we heard the material on the back of the seats can be a little bit difficult to hand sew through. So now we're just wiping away that excess glue. And here it looks like we did a pretty neat job, but as you can see from the back, it's a little bit messier. That's fine though, as eventually it's going to be hidden by a wall. This is pretty much the finished product. If you're planning on cutting the bench in half like we did, the only reason we wanted a single seat in is purely for the access. We're going to have a big old wall here with a hatch through, so we want us to be able to climb through relatively easily. So this is about the space that we're left up with, which is perfect, can fit through that nice and easily. But yeah, this is what the finished product will look like roughly. Obviously you can do a much better job with the upholstery than we did, but not bad for our needs, not bad at all.
Your head was not in shot. Got a plane going overhead.